classes, I realized that there's something so much more about these little fellows than I ever realized before. And the more I sort of researched, the more it's come up with that is quite amazing. And particularly, one must discriminate between spices and herbs. Okay, fundamentally, spices are dried herbs. Okay, but herbs are green. Okay, so distinguish between the two. And the green herbs, they really they contain the most remarkable chemicals that you can imagine. And science is only picking it up now. I guess the Asians for thousands of years have used herbs, and but they just knew that they worked and so on. But how they are compatible, no, compatible is not the right word, how they influence one another, the diversity of herbs. The one sort of enhances the microbiome to an extent that it can absorb the other one, if you know what I mean. And so, I can't imagine, I haven't sort of done a research in this direction of saying what I'm going to say, and that is, I wonder if you could live only on herbs.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because I mean they have all the basics like protein and all the vitamins and the amino acids, but I guess your gut comes into play with the different enzymes, but you've got to introduce the correct enzymes into the gut so that not only your digestive enzymes, but enzymes throughout your body are the sort of really key players in that. And yet the herbs, if you have a diversity across the spectrum, absolutely amazing how they produce these enzymes. But anyway, don't let me carry on with what I've been researching. It's interesting.
No, but I think it's fascinating though, because clearly food supply and food security is going to become an increasingly important issue, particularly because of the way that we've been farming like monoculture and producing unhealthy food anyway.
Yeah.
But with climate change and so on, you would have thought that, well, I'm assuming that herbs perhaps are somewhat resilient, because you can create their own little microclimates in effect, can't you?
Yeah, that's an interesting point that you just, because I was trying to imagine today when I was working and researching, I would come up with some information and I would get this warm feeling in my upper chest. Okay, now that always tells me I'm right. Okay,
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like coming from another dimension. But when I get it low down, sort of below my belly button, then it's like negativity. It's like something. But I've this feeling up top here, and I just kept on researching. I've got other things to do that I've got to catch up with classes, but I kept on researching this herbs and finding more things and feeling good about it. And I know my class is 10 times too long, but I'm still researching.
Yeah.
And you've hit the nail on the head. I think you've hit a really important point, is that as things change for the whole planet, okay, could we live off herbs that are grown inside our house? Yeah. That's an interesting point.
Because when you think about lots of things associated with climate change and sustainability, probably more importantly, you think about all of those things that we're addressing from a sustainability perspective, and it's going away from, like building big dams for water storage to having your own tanks at home,
Mm.
and now solar power on the roof, and all of those things are always coming back, aren't they? Coming
Yeah.
back to the smaller scale. And it doesn't have to be the micro scale at the single household, but it's coming back to that smaller, more efficient, more sustainable approach. So from a food production point of view, a combination of things like community gardens and herb gardens seems like a way to produce very nutritious food,
Right.
for a community.
Yeah. 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 That's interesting.
Mm. My eldest son was telling me the other day that there's a community garden over near where he lives, and the way it operates is you actually join like an organisation who runs the garden, and it's only like a token membership fee, like I don't know, $2 a month or something like that. But part of the membership means you have to work in the garden at least 2 days a month.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. That's
So
interesting.
so membership, a requirement of membership is that you have to contribute
Yeah.
more than money. So
That's a concept you and I have been talking about the future. Eh?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Community gardens, you, you're not going to believe this, but the first time I saw a community garden was when you and I were at IIB in London.
Oh,
Okay.
really? Yeah.
Yeah, and they've got community gardens, the Ring Road, around the Ring Road, around London, and I went to visit. I think it was after the course. I stayed there a little while or before. I can't recall, but
Mm.
I saw community gardens there, and I thought then, nice concept. But I was saying to myself, well, I've got to get on now and use my IB accreditation. I've got to growing gardens, but I haven't thought about it until this moment. Yes, community gardens. Because then people can share skills too. There has to be somebody who is in charge, I guess.
Mm.
Uh,
And,
uh,
and you do need to have organisation around it. I mean, there's where I walk, my dog every day. There's a little garden that someone's put just down near the waterfront there.
mm,
But clearly, no one looks after it.
okay.
So and it's barely a garden. It's only a small patch. It'd only be like a couple of meters by a couple of meters sort of thing. But
Mm,
it's just overgrown. But they've got a sign on it. Community garden. Please contribute sort of thing. But no one does because there's no sort of ownership or
yeah,
commitment to it. So
right, right, right.
mm,
That also tells us something, doesn't it? Eh?
mm, mm.
We need we need organization. We need leadership, and yeah, we need people to take us forward.
Organisation leadership, and I think we also need new language. I'm sort of coming to the conclusion. Need new language. I think there's too much in our existing language, which is well, it's not based on truth. That's for sure. Like to give you an example. Like the question of the day on that gratefulness forum today. I can't remember the exact wording on it, but it was basically it was two sentences. The first sentence was um, everyone in their life has a battle to fight, and then it's sort of what can you do to help people, something like that.
Yeah, yeah,
And I thought to myself, well, the number one falsehood there is it's not a battle. Life is not a battle.
yeah,
Like life presents challenges and opportunities and all of those sort of things, but it's not a battle because the language of battles, as you and I well know through the business community, is all about strategizing and getting the upper ground and winners and losers. And
mm,
well, that's not what life is about.
yeah, yeah.
life and living is not about that. So, and I think that, some of that stuff which is just in our language every single day, I think needs to be dropped, because not based in truth,
Yeah, it's definitely not based in truth. I agree. Um, but which comes first, the egg or the chicken?
Well, you know the answer to that. You've already told me.
Yes. Yes, I have. There's some language that needs to be dropped as well.
Yeah, well, that's right.
Is that cliche?
Actually, funny, you're talking about language. I read a little.
You were talking about language.
I was, yes. I read a little article the other day, and it was talking about where some of these sayings that we have in our language came from, like where they originated. So the term "piss poor," I don't know whether you've heard where that originated from.
No.
Basically, in the early days in England, there was a class of people who were very poor, and their primary source of income was to sell their urine to tanneries to dye leather.
You're joking.
No, and so the people that did that, who collected the urine of their family, were known as the piss poor.
That's poor. That's interesting. That's interesting. Yeah.
And they talked about a whole range of other things like that. Like the term "raining cats and dogs." And I think it might have originated as like raining cats and mice or something like that, but it's turned into cats and dogs.
Mm.
But where that originated from apparently was, again, similar sort of environment. But with the housing in those days, they had thick thatched roofs, and it was quite warm there, like for cats and mice, presumably, to get up there. But whenever it rained, it became slippery, and they would fall out of the. And so, hence it was right.
Cats and mice. That's interesting. Yeah.
So there seems to, like, some of these sayings that you sort of think, oh, you don't think about them, you just hear them and repeat
Yeah.
them,
Yeah. Yeah.
but they are founded in certain things. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
I wonder, talking about language, whether language, will there ever be sort of just one language? Uh, well, let me just go back another step. I saw in the news in the last week, or somewhere, that some 11-year-old had just got their doctorate. Okay.
Mm.
And it made me think. Okay. And but then the same day, I read where another child said what they wanted to do. They wanted to create one language for the whole world,
Mm.
and they were going to invent it. It hasn't been invented yet.
Mm.
I think, at that sort of young age, isn't it marvelous to think like that?
It is.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's also interesting, because one of the things that Zen masters often say, like again, there was a story where, and like this was in the not too distant past, like in the last like 20 years or so, there was a conversation with a literary student with a Zen master talking about translating Japanese Zen texts into English.
Yeah.
And the Zen master says, well, it's a complete and utter waste of time. You don't need to, because it's a universal language. And he said, well, what do you mean? He says, well, the sound of rain, falling on banana leaves. You don't need words for that. It just is what it is.
Okay. Yeah.
So, and there's probably lots of elements of life and living where, and I guess what he's sort of saying is that words are redundant. you know, so maybe there's some truth in that as well, you know.
Yeah, well, I guess so, because words are engaging your intellect, your active mind, whereas there's, when you meditate and just even relax, even in dream state, okay, there's communication going on there very strongly. There's feeling, the communication through feeling, not through the brain,
Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
subconscious, maybe, yeah. So that's definitely universal.
Yeah, and maybe, you know, that as our level of awareness increases, maybe, or through alien technologies or whatever, it might be more of a mental telepathy thing, you know. So
yeah,
and that won't be a word-based thing, I wouldn't have thought, you know. So
no, it isn't. I mean, people who communicate with animals now, um, and there are people that communicate with trees. I'm
yeah,
sure your book would have
yeah, it
spoken
did.
that.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
And so, yes, I mean, you think how you look at going back in our storybooks, how people used to hug trees, okay? How the Buddha used to sit under a tree.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So,
exactly.
yeah. So if we stop using the mind, we'll probably find something far more important and far more vast than the limitation of your country's language.
Yeah, and put the legal profession out of work immediately. You know?
Can you imagine a court case that the judge saying, right now, everybody meditate? I get a sense that you're guilty.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, so, but why not? I mean, why not? I mean, presumably, you know, there are, as I said, other aliens in that who don't use words, you know, so.
Yeah, and the Lemurians, I haven't come across any of the research that I've done that they talk about a language, but they certainly talk about, the moving into the fifth dimension, where everybody knows what's going on. Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
like the past and the present sort of right now. And so I'm assuming that there would then no language, because you just know in that fifth dimension, which then they come back to the third dimension, which must be really tough. Well, it is. Yeah.
Well, I mean, just sort of pondering that thought for a moment. I mean, what an incredible place.
Yeah.
You know, because everything's just based on truth, you know, so
Yeah. Yeah.
everything, you know, so there's, and what a liberating dimension it must be, because you don't have to second guess anything.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, apparently the Lemurians were like that. Okay. They described their existence as heaven on earth. Uh, there was nobody that wanted for food. There was nobody that fought with anybody else in the Lemur civilization. And at a wink of an eye, they could move between third and fifth dimension. So, that's probably where we're heading to now.
Yeah, yeah.
I guess so. I think, maybe Mount Shasta will open up and Mount Kailash will open up and the Lemurians will come out.
Could well be, yeah. Could
Yeah.
well be. I just hope we're awake enough to notice.
Well, they won't come out until we are. They've made that clear. So definitely not. At the moment, they sort of moving interplanetary, using the fifth dimension from the center of the Earth out to outer space, to the Pleiades and places like that. So they're just waiting to see how things unfold, and I think they've waited longer than they expected to wait.
Do you have any speculation about, there's obviously an element of the human race who do wake up? I don't know what sort of numbers, but clearly, when you look at, say, the Buddha and the number of Buddhas there've been over the years and other enlightened beings and so on, like you and I probably can't know other than to speculate as to how many there might be, but do you think that they interact with those people? Presumably they do. I mean,
there's no doubt in my mind that they do, because these people, the Lemurians, are human beings. And they were part and parcel of the emergence and the development and the involvement of the human race, going right back to, the giants, and then the Adamic, and then the other root races that have come and gone. They were one of those root races, okay? And so definitely, and I have no doubt that some of the let's call them the Buddhas or the prophets and so on, they incarnated in those Lemurian times and then moved up and moved through. And I mean, even right from the word go, there were from the Adamic root races, there were saviors, let's call it for the sake of the word that we understand, maybe might be a better word. And yeah, and so they've always been part and parcel. So it's all one and the same. That's really what I'm saying.
So would you characterize Moya as a prophet?
No, I wouldn't. No, definitely not. I mean, I know your next question is say, well, what is he? Okay. Is that your next question?
Well, you can answer it if you like.
No, I don't have to. Only if you like.
No, yeah, well, okay. I'm interested in your view. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, yes, there are words, and but the words that I would use, people would just, the connotations of those words mean something to them, which is not what I would be meaning when I use them. That doesn't really help very much. But let me try and find other words. I mean, the bottom line, okay, just relax, okay?
I'm relaxed, very relaxed.
Good, okay. He is God.
Okay, yep.
All right. So now, I wouldn't say that, to anybody other than you, okay? And but that doesn't stop me trying to find other words. Now, when when the Earth was created, long before humanity was created. Okay, I mean, humanity is just just a quick an eye flash right, in the history of the Earth. So things were evolving. Let's use quantum physics and energy were evolving, and Moya writes about it, in a way that I think, I mean, it was really, really difficult for me. Well, you can't understand it. I think probably that's the bottom line. You can read the words, and when he talks about, a pendulum in nothingness, for example, and those sort of words, okay, and then how over just an incredible period of time, that pendulum just like gave a wobble or something to that extent, which then started a whole new dynamic in nothingness. Okay, And then slowly, things started evolving, like the Earth. And
it's exactly the same story that I've read. You substituting the word Shiva, because Shiva was nothing.
okay,
And then Shiva just sort of awoke or something. I forget the exact words they use, but the convenience of this conversation, it was something like awoke, which was essentially the movement created sound. And
yeah.
so
Yeah, and so there was the beginning of all right, you call it Chiba. He called it Muntu. Okay, and so Muntu in the darkness sort of started evolving, started waking, and there's a lot sort of in between that he writes about, but started waking and then emerged on the physical earth. Okay, and then started moving away from the physical earth, or from the astral plane. I think it was not so much the physical, the astral earth. My mind, I'm not sure. And so he went and through a process and got to the 10th plane, and and so that's where things really started to happen, was on the 10th plane, and then Muntu, okay, had to, I don't know whether he had to or what happened, but there was some sort of, what's the word when things dissipate, when things break down, I guess. I just can't think of the word now. And so from that that process, then souls were born out of that process on the 10th plane. Okay, and the essence of Muntu, not Muntu. Okay, he gives it a name. It starts with an N. I haven't recalled this now for a long time. Something like nitro or nicro, or just can't think of it. Went up to the 66th plane, I think it was, to wait. Okay, and so so that process of the souls and so on, who eventually fell, and then there was a resurrection. Okay, again, some long time later, sort of, and this entity from it came back down and entered what we call God today. Okay, and so things then started evolving. But I want to just maybe end the conversation with saying, well, now various people, as we talk about prophets and things like that, have come to the earth, and Jesus and all the rest of them, and there's a whole hierarchy of, let's call them, officers up there. And now Moya, even today now, is can go beyond the 66th, 67th plane now into nothingness again. Okay, and he talks about in our meeting. He has spoken about it in our meeting, our small group meeting, about what it feels like. Okay, he can actually bring it into his physical body now that's on Earth, because he leaves from this physical body and goes up, and then when we question him about stupid things that only us humans can question him about, almost one feels almost embarrassed to ask him questions about, about our humanity and so on. and you know, and what sort of influence does he now have sitting on the earth with things? And you know, I can see him now. He like gets a little smile on his face, you know, and he said, "Oh, you know, in those days," he said, "I used to chat a lot to Nelson Mandela, and he would say we got on well together, but he never physically went to see him. Okay, never physically went to see him. Okay, and the various presidents of the United States, you know, and others that he would sort of just allude to, that he, you know, he was there last night, for example, you know, and we knew, you just know that he's telling the truth, but he can't put it into words.
Yeah, yeah.
And then he says, I will leave this earth plane. Okay, I'm just creating molds. Okay, creating molds, and when I leave, I will be for a long time in the second world, the what do you call it? You know, the duplicate of the physical world. Okay, and obviously, you know, simultaneously in all the dimensions. But he said he's going to stay there, and he's going to protect the planet. He says eventually, you know, the planet will have fulfilled its destiny, and there will be a replacement planet. And he talks about that, and that replacement planet is not Armageddon. Okay, Armageddon comes much later, and he talks about that too. So he's here, but he's everywhere now at the same time. So, you know, how do I describe him? You know, he's just so much more than a prophet. Okay, he's so much more than the mind can comprehend. So he says he's come down here. He's creating, you know, by going to a location, a place. Okay, like him and I went. You know, we went to Durban together for him to give a talk and so on, and just the two of us. And he went to this place where we gave the talk, and he said, "I'm just creating a mold." Okay, probably won't come back here. Okay, but we created a mold, and he'd move on, and we would go back, and so. But then he also wrote things for the physical world. Okay, but he says whoever wants them now can, you know, you can take them, but I'm only printing them in order so that the information is at this level as well. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So he said there'll be some of you who will then take these works when the time is right, and you'll publish them. Okay. But then the world will be ready for them, and the world will understand that there is a God. Okay. And that they are dormant qualities within each human of that God, and they really need, and so his books will sort of take them through history and everything that human beings would want to know in order to understand how to get back, how the soul can evolve and get back to the 10th plane. Sorry, I answered my own question. I guess you didn't ask it, but you.
But it's critically important, though, isn't it, to, you know, start these conversations in the sense of getting people to become aware of some of these things which have always been there.
Yeah.
You know, it's not new. It's always been there. It's just.
But it's not easy, Don. I'm talking for myself. It's not easy to talk about them. Okay.
Oh, it's because words are useless for a lot of it, you know.
Yeah, but it's absolutely fine with you. But to talk to anybody else, I think I can get hurt, and it's just basically who I am, I guess. I don't know why, but
No,
it's
but it also gets frustrating.
absolute crap, and
Yeah.
and that upsets me because and I mustn't. And I don't know whether I must or mustn't. I just do. Okay. I do become affected by harsh things that people talk. When I talk anything spiritual, in fact, because
But isn't it interesting though? Because a lot of people try and anchor things in so-called logic.
mm, mm,
But since the discovery of the quantum fields and things like that, even the scientists now use that term fuzzy logic,
yeah,
basically meaning it defies logic.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
You know,
yeah,
so so to have this sort of response that that's nonsense or it doesn't make sense or that's crap or whatever, it's not about making sense. It's about understanding what is, and
yeah,
even the word understanding is not the right word. It's about experiencing, I think, what is, because it's not a mental process per se. It's about
maybe sensing.
yeah,
Yeah,
sensing. Yeah, no. So, but it's a critically important thing. And the other thing too, is part of the distraction when you are anchored in or try to anchor yourself in this sort of so-called logic is that there's this disbelief, that follows hard on the heels with it, So that I remember even Sadhguru was talking, or someone asked him a question about there's this yogi over in India in particular, and the story goes that he's, allegedly, hundreds of years of age, and people keep on seeing him here and seeing him there and seeing him somewhere else. And he just said, look, he said, it's almost impossible for me to talk about this stuff because, it's sort of a state of disbelief. He says, but there are yogis who, and to use the language we've just been talking about, will go into another dimension. And in those dimensions, there is no time. So when they come back, and they don't necessarily come back in their physical body, they'll come back in their etheric body,
right. That's what we're used to.
yeah,
Yeah,
and people might see them or sense them or whatever, but it's not necessarily that they're hundreds of years old or thousands of years old in the sense that where they are, there is no time.
yeah,
So time is irrelevant, when you start to talk about some of those things, So, and to
yeah,
try and anchor yourself and try and understand everything from a position of space and time, is limiting in its own self.
it's impossible.
Yeah,
But we don't know it's impossible.
yeah,
Okay, man,
yeah,
we just don't know it. That's all we know.
yeah.
Okay, it's like the consumeristic society. That's all we know these days.
Mm,
Nothing else.
mm.
Um, and yeah, so we run down other people's concepts.
Well, we do. We run down other people's concepts. We close ourselves down because consumerism is a subtractive process.
Mm,
It's not a process of growth and thriving. It's a
yeah,
process of controlling and owning and taking, and it's a subtractive process. So it's
right.
creating hell on earth. It has been. You know?
Mm, mm, mm.
And I think in that same process, to use the context that Alatra uses, is it stifles creativity.
Yeah,
The creativity in the sense of, and I think that's maybe in one sense a definition of creativity. It's sort of seeing things that apparently are impossible.
mm, mm.
So,
Yeah, even the word seen. Okay.
yeah. Well, again, it's based on our own 5 limitations, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mm. Did you see that little news article I flicked through to you on
Oh, yes, I did. Yeah,
about the moon? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Thank you very much. I did, and yeah, I'm not quite sure what to say about it. But very interesting. I think I've replied that to you. I think. Yeah, yeah,
But it's sort of interesting, like the language in the article, like the scientists saying, oh, we're letting countries know in advance so that they can make preparations. It sounds very much like Alatra, doesn't it? So,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
based on the wobble of the moon. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
The wobble of the pendulum.
yeah, 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 yeah. So,
But when like as you say, when I sort of read and hear and talk about some of these things, as you say, the energy levels at the right feels good. It's like it's an energy of strength and positivity, and yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah,
So yeah, very much, I guess, in the traditional teachings, it's one of hope, but not hope meaning maybe, but hope meaning absolute confidence.
yeah, 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 yeah. And knowing.
Yeah, yeah, that sort of certainty, um, but not one that you can point to through an eloquent speech.
Right.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. God does not use marketers. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, I love it. I love it. I love it.
Yeah, you've got to.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I really appreciate you sharing your insights and views on that, because that sounds true. If that's the best way I can describe it.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Mm.
But as I sit here now at this moment thinking, there's something that is imminent. Okay.
Oh, for sure.
I
For sure.
sense that, but I don't know whether it's physical. I don't know whether it's in the etheric world, to use the term you brought up that I was looking for earlier.
Mm.
Um, you know, I don't know, but I just sense, and all I can say to myself is,
Mm.
be still, be quiet, okay?
Mm.
Uh, and
Well, I share your view, because I'm like that in the morning, particularly, like at this time of year when I'm up early, it's pitch black, if the sky's clear, it's just bursting with stars everywhere. And and I never walk with a light, so,
yeah,
and it's just a delightful experience. But again, there's this, just like you've said, there's this real sense of anticipation and sense of imminence about it all. Yeah.
yeah, 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 it is. And have you thought about it? I mean, what does your feeling bring out when you just sense that? I mean, are you thinking, something far beyond you, or something quite close to you? Was that a
Well, that's a good question, actually. I mean, it's sort of like the spiritual paradox. It's sort of both simultaneously, isn't it? That this realization, in one sense, that you're part of something much, much bigger than what you're experiencing now.
Mm,
But that sense of imminence is the scope and depth of that experience is about to be blown wide open.
Yeah, yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah.
Without a doubt, like it's absolute certainty in my mind. It's certainty. It's not even a shadow of a doubt. It's just yes, just yes. You know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It is. It's because I think um, it could well be also not, not part of this three-dimensional world. It could be this for me. I'm talking about could be moving on to an etheric experience. Okay, only as opposed to it or whatever else. And I sense that I'm involved in something,
Mm.
and that you know um, being prepared in a sense, or
Well, the other strong feeling I get too is, and it's a very precise path, but I just look at things going on around me and I just say to myself, like, this is just nonsense. This is just ridiculous. But it's observing the nonsense surrounding it, but not being part of it, not getting
yeah,
hooked up in it, not reacting to it,
yeah, yeah,
and that's the precision of it, that it's almost a bit like when you described, that someone, says something harsh towards you or treats you poorly in response to something, that part of our conditioned response is that, this right wrong thinking. Well, I'm right and you're wrong, and you need to be punished, or that's something needs to happen. Where the way of the enlightened is that you just know it, and you don't have to do anything. It doesn't require a response,
yeah.
because the truth is always the truth. You know.
Well, yeah. Even if you didn't say that, but the truth is the
Mm,
truth. You just stop there,
mm,
before that, and I agree.
mm.
I agree. Um, I
And,
tell.
and and that's part of our conditioning. Like, and that's why there's legal systems and that to work out who's right and who's wrong.
Mm,
Well, what if we don't need to do that?
yeah, yeah,
Because that's when things like karma, there's always a consequence.
yeah,
So you
yeah,
don't need someone to determine that for you, because the consequence is there. That's just
yeah,
the way
yeah.
karma operates in that. So yeah.
And karma and things like that. We're just talking about a moment right now in your and my existence, and it's that sort of just a sensing right now
Mm,
that don't. Yeah, I told you on Wednesday when we chatted about what I felt about the collective consciousness Zoom meeting on the Sunday. Okay,
yeah,
I
yeah.
mentioned that, and um, they they're all good. Is that the right word? They're all good people. Okay,
Mm,
they're all following God. They're following a path. They're following hopefulness, and they're following truth, and they've got some amazing recipes for natural cures for the virus and things and all that. Okay, and it's clearly very great for them.
mm,
But it's just not me.
mm,
Okay,
mm,
I there's nothing wrong with it. I identify with everything. Okay, but
mm,
somehow I just sense that I'm not there. Okay,
mm,
I'm
mm,
just not there.
mm.
Um,
And I
and
understand completely what you're saying, and I feel the same in
mm,
in some sense about some of the Elantra stuff. Like they're fantastic people and doing fantastic work, but the pool still seems too shallow. Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a good analogy. Yeah.
mm,
Possibly that's I don't know. Yeah, it's just what it is.
mm,
You know, maybe I've drowned already, and other people are in the paddle, and you know. I
mm,
don't-
mm.
um, so,
No, but I agree with 100%. You know, there is that sense of anticipation and
yeah,
but as I say, words get a bit clumsy after a
they
very
are,
short.
and it's so interesting that we started off the conversation about words, you know,
Mm, mm,
and now it's so relevant in what we're saying right now.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm. And I think too. I don't know about you. I suspect, but I think having this sort of curious mindset, curious in the sense of an openness, like a sense of wonder and a sense of, you know, this imminence, this sort of expectation almost, you know.
Mm.
And I think and I find that when I'm immersed in that, it's
Mm.
quite a joyful thing. You know, to just find myself happy and smiling and stuff.
Yes,
And I can't point to anything to say, well, this has
I
made me happy.
agree.
You know, yeah. Mm. You've just frozen for a moment. Hmm. Are you still there? You back? There you are. You're back.
Okay, yeah. I could hear you all the time.
Oh, okay, I just had a frozen, smiling face looking at me.
Uh, I'm moving and I'm smiling, and so but I could hear you say frozen. So
Yeah.
okay,
So you've obviously got your internet fixed.
yeah. That's now up and running, but not to my satisfaction.
Oh, really? Okay.
This, for example, you know,
Mm,
would perhaps happen once every third class or something. It would just
mm,
freeze for a minute, and you know. But anyway,
mm.
it's absolute minor situation. Um, it's got
Very good.
yeah,
Well, maybe that's a good place to leave it for the day, is it? I don't know.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
You look deep in thought.
I'm actually looking at my painting, quite honestly.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I was just staring at it, and I don't know, things were coming to me, and I can
Mm.
remember painting that, and I could sort of, but somehow there are other things in my mind now when I look at it as opposed to when I painted it.
Mm.
Uh,
Mm.
so,
Very good.
yeah. Okay.
Okay, then. Well, I look forward to talking to you and hearing
Um,
of all your other adventures on Wednesday.
yeah. When do you do your next class?
I haven't set a date yet, but I will.
Okay,
I will shortly. Yeah.
okay. And
Yeah.
have you had your book back from the person that was just reorganizing it?
Yes, I've got it back. Yeah. Yeah. I should send you a copy. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, it'll be great. Yeah,
Mm. It's a bit more visual now. Mm.
right. And are you going to print it?
Thinking about it. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Thinking about it. Haven't decided yet. But the trouble is, as you know, as an author, you're never satisfied with your work. You know, so.
Yeah, I definitely. You know, there's
Mm.
a time when you just got to actually stop. Even with the creation of these get set up classes, there's time you just got to stop. You know?
I guess that's why authors print second and third editions.
Possibly, yes.
Otherwise, it never gets published. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, but yeah, even if you just print a few copies, that's one thing. And there's something about a hard printed copy.
There is, isn't there? There is something about a physical book. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Without a doubt.
Mm.
Okay, then.
Okay.
I'll ponder that further. Okay.
Okay. All right. Thanks very much.
Talk to you on Wednesday. See you now.
Okay, bye.
Bye.